or sitting. And if you would like to put in the chat your acknowledgement for the country in which you're residing, that would be wonderful. And then we can move on to the formal part of the presentation. Thank you. Okay, so we have two speakers this evening, and the intention is that we will hear from both of them. We'll hear from Karen Anderson first, who will share with us her kinder stories, and then we'll have a brief questioning just for those that can't wait for the end, and then we'll switch on to Fiona Harris. Each will be given about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll take more questions at the end. If you aren't able to wait, pop your question in the chat, and then Bron and Steph have agreed that they will pick those up. So there's three of us that are looking at the chat to pick up any questions and monitor that at the end. Going back, we would ask that you raise your hand using the emoji at the bottom of your screen if you want to ask a question rather than just breaking in. And I'll repeat what Steph said, that we're recording this, but it's only showing the person who has the blue square around them. So if you don't want to be shown, you can blank out your photo. Okay, so you can, lock off your screen. We would ask that you are muted during the presentations, so that in case there's a disturbance in the background for you. Okay, so my part is to share a little bit about C Week, and Bron is carefully put up the page that A2 has created for C Week. And each year we do this around March. So this year it's the second week of March. And it's to promote the connection to oceans. And what we're hoping is that people see that it doesn't matter whether you're inland or on the ocean, you're still connected to how the ocean functions, and the oceans manage and control our weather. So they are absolutely, it all is absolutely intertwined. The page offers some resources. So you'll see on their latest resources, Sue Elliott helped me and A2 when we created this resource for this year as our first offering, to make sure that it had early childhood embedded into it. We also have events, and we've been encouraging people to pop up any events that they may have, just to try to gather a sense of who's doing what around the nation, and we're hoping that builds over the years. There is a lovely little competition in there for early years. It's a drawing competition. I've already received some, and they're just divine. So we're hoping that it generates, if you don't have time to do a whole program, it generates a bit of interest by just engaging in the drawing, like read something about the ocean literacy for this year and with your students or your children, and then get them to draw what they think it means for them. We have external links, and we're building that library so that you can go on there for a re-reckoning for what's happening in your state, but also nationally and other people that we know of. The more resources is actually the MESA collection. So if you ever want to have in-depth information about oceans, this is a collection that's been building for 30 years. So A2 has become the custodian of that, and we're in the process of redesigning how that's presented. It was built on Dreamweaver, and for us, of those that have been around forever, you know that Dreamweaver is an old system. So I hope you'd update that. So that's just a bit of a brief. Have a look at the site, and please contact me. I'm the current coordinator of C Week, and always happy to help out with any requests. Having said that, I'd like to now move on to the first speaker for this evening, and Karen Anderson is a kindergarten teacher at Balnarring Preschool in Victoria, located on the Mornington Peninsula. She established a beach kinder program some years ago and has incorporated learning about First Nations people. She is a past convener of the Early Childhood Outdoor Learning Network and currently manages and implements their training package. Also, she co-authored Early Years Learning in Australian Natural environments, published by Oxford in 2022. So I'd like to hand over to Karen to share with us her stories. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer, and congratulations on that great Sea Week page. It looks fabulous.
Thank you.
I have to go and look at it myself now. So hi, everyone. I'm a little bit in shock because I was told I had 8 minutes and now you're telling me I've got longer. So who knows what stories I'm going to tell you. Anyway, here we go. So thanks for inviting me along. Kindergarten teacher at Balnarring Preschool on the Mornington Peninsula. I'm on Boon Wurrung country, so I acknowledge the Boon Wurrung peoples of the Greater Kulin Nation and recognise the strong connection that they've had to the land for thousands of years, and be really grateful of them sharing their knowledges with us at the kindergarten for us to be able to deepen the learning for the children. And also recognise the elders that we've worked with, which is Naui Carolyn Briggs and Faye Stewart Muir. So I've been at Balnarring for 40 years. We started the nature program in 2011, I think it was. So what's that, like 15 years maybe I've been doing that now. And over that time, it's changed. So the philosophy and the the vision of that program has probably changed over time. To begin with, our main purpose was to connect children with the land. But as time's gone on, First Nations perspectives and teachings have probably changed positions to that philosophy. So we try to, wherever possible, to take the teachings that we've learnt from the elders and other First Nations peoples that we've worked with into our nature spaces, but also into our preschool environment. When it first started, it was sort of like two different philosophies running. So we sort of had like the nature day and then we had like the kinder days, but now it's all totally entwined. And last year or the year before, I asked Boon Wurrung elder Faye Stewart Muir if she could give us a Boon Wurrung word to describe our program. It felt wrong not to be that to be at the forefront of our programming. So she gave us a word called Nangabik, and it means country learning, or country is the school. So that felt right to be able to progress our learning and our dedication, if you like, to these programs, to bring in First Nations and have that at the top of our philosophy now. We go with the kindergarten is a community kindergarten run by the parents, so the committee of management. We've got 9 staff, 3 in each team. So we've got 2 3-year-old groups that come for 5 hours a week, and 2.5 hours of that is down at Balnarring Beach and Bush Space. And then we have 2 4-year-old groups that come 3 times a week for 5 hours, and 15 hours, and 5 hours of that is down at the beach in the bush. And we only have 1 room in our service. So we sort of coordinate everybody. Some people are at the beach while some people are at the centre, and then it swaps. So it's all this is going on all the time. We've got a really beautiful environment down at Balnarring Beach. We're hoping not many people discover it because it's not too touristy at the moment, which is really lovely, which means that the impact on our beach compared with some other beaches is probably less. There's not as much rubbish that we find in our beaches as what they would over on the Port Phillip side. So we're on Western Port Bay side. When we're standing on our beach, we look across to Phillip Island. So some of you may be familiar with Phillip Island. So that's where, give you a bit of context, but you have to drive to get to Phillip Island. It's about an hour drive from here. So when I got invited to do this, I'm like, sustainability. I'm with all these gurus on this call that are sustainability gurus, and I don't think I'm one of those. And I also I look at sustainability through a little bit different lens, I think, to what some of the other presenters or people on the Alliance would be looking at. So I started asking myself, what is sustainability for me? And I think my main focus is I really want the children and the families and the Balnarring community to recognise the role that they play in caring for the space around them, and that reciprocity. So what we do comes back to us in lots of different ways, and what happens in nature comes back to us. And with First Nations lens on top, reciprocity is really important for them. So I try to teach the children and guide them about understanding that everything has a impact. So if you, for instance, step on a crab, then that crab dies, and then it had a job to do in nature, and now it can't do that job anymore. So then all these other things start to get impacted. And I don't get into really deep like food webs and things, but I do tell them that they've all got a job to do, and if we take one thing out of that job, then the rest of the things don't work. And remember, I'm working with 3 and 4-year-olds, so I'm trying to do it at a concept level that they understand. The beach environment changes all the time, so we never know what's going to happen when what's going to be presented to us when we go down there. And obviously we've got high tides and low tides, and the children are starting to understand that the differences and what they can access and what learning can occur depending on where that water line is, tide line is. The other thing that we've learned from First Nations is the importance of relationships and listening to the stories of the landscape. So those relationships are with ourselves to start with. So how are we feeling in those spaces, and what is being outside with nature meaning to us? We didn't used to use the word with. I don't even know what word we use now. But we talk about being with nature as in with being a relationship, rather than under a tree, you're with a tree, rather than at the water, you're with the water. So that sort of change, and just changing that little word really makes a big difference to what you're feeling. So there's relationships with the children and the families, obviously our local rangers, the community, First Nations, but then there's relationships with the birds, the trees, the sea, the marine life, and we really are strong with those, and that all of those entities within that environment all have a story to tell and teach us. So for instance, if the black raven was flying over the beach and sat down near us, and that in Bunwurrung language that his name's Wan's job is to care for the waterways. So when we see him come, the children will go, oh, he's come to check, or he's come to say we're doing a good job. So just trying to weave that in all the time, so it's not just a lesson, or it's just not something they hear once. There's always this flowing of the different knowledges. And also First Nations taught us that everything has a story in the landscape, and for us to wonder what that is. We might not know the ancient story, but we do know we might know what the contemporary story is. So when the children see things happen or find things, we always say, what do you think the story is here? And the story could be about rubbish, or about erosion, or it could be about creatures that have visited the space when we weren't there, but just getting them to think all the time about that. I've got a really gory story to tell you, so hopefully you're not eating people on this call, but just an example of like nature at its true being, I guess, is last year we found a dead seal on the beach. And that's pretty sad when you see that really big, beautiful animal dead. And one of the parents actually walked up and said, oh, I found a dead seal. Like, do you want me to move it a bit so you can look at it? And I'm like, yeah, okay. So we looked at it and we had this really big discussion about, why do you think this seal's here? Where has it come from? And the answers that the children gave me about why they thought that seal was dead were so deep. Like one little boy said to me, I think its mum ran out of milk and so it couldn't drink anymore and so it died. And I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? And then there was, there's always a shark ate it, but it didn't eat it. There's always that it got sick, and then of course it's eaten something that it shouldn't have eaten. So when we get that, then that leads into us, if we find things on the beach, maybe this is what the seal ate. It thought it was a jellyfish, or it thought it was whatever. So it gave us a really, rich conversations. And then what happened was, the week after, the seal was still on the beach. This is the gory bit. It was covered in maggots. And I'm standing there trying to be very brave and not lose my lunch. And the fascination from the children about the job that those maggots were doing, and watching them, like the whole ground around this seal was like moving. And I could talk about that, the seals provided food for the maggots, etc., etc. And I had to explain it about 20 times because children were coming over just in small groups. So I was a little bit by the end of it. And then when their parents arrived and they've all said, Mum and Dad, come and see the seal with the maggots in it. So watching the parents' responses. So that was just like seeing nature working, like with no interference from us. And then about 3 weeks later, we found just the skull left. So they'd seen that whole process of decomposing in the natural state, if you like, not maggots on your bench because you hadn't washed your dishes or something like that. So, but those sort of stories, you can't share those through books or through videos. Seeing that firsthand, it was really disgusting, but really great, if that makes sense. And so those stories happen all the time. First time I've seen that many maggots in one spot, I must say. The other thing is that we talk about only taking what you need and the importance of giving back. And that's a very strong principle, if you like, in First Nations cultures. So always talking to the children about, you know, like picking up beautiful shells. Yep, they're gorgeous, but we'll leave them here because those shells can be used for other homes or to create the sand and that sort of thing. So we always talk about that. And when I was younger, I was a shell collector. So it's really hard for me to tell children to leave them there because I know how exciting it is to find a nice shell. Sometimes we might borrow them from the beach and take them back to kinder to explore a bit more, and then we take them back. But we try to give that message about giving back and not taking all the time, and that's how you sustain that environment. What else? The other thing, I've just started changing the way I talk about plants. So children like to pull things off plants. It's pretty common for children to want to do that, but I've just changed my language around that to say that when the plant doesn't need anything on it anymore, it drops it to the ground. So if you find the things on the ground, that means the plant doesn't need them anymore and you can use them for whatever you want to. But if they're still attached to the plant, it still needs them. And that seems to have had resonated with children a little bit more than when I just said, you know, the plant doesn't like it, or it's not kind, or those sorts of words. So actually getting them to think about, well, there's a reason why that plant has flowers, or there's a reason why it's got seed pods on it, and it still needs them for whatever reason, whether it's for creatures or for its own growth. Yes, Jennifer, you're on mute.
1 minute.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm going well then. All right. So I could talk forever. I just wanted to show you a couple of books that are really great to help with understanding about the impact of humans on nature. So not necessarily the beach, but as Jennifer said before, that all connects. So this one, Benny Bangara's, which I'm sure many of you will have seen, is a really great example of how humans impact. This one, Dear Earth, is also just giving the children understanding about the impact. And I've actually had children writing to the earth after this and burying their letter in the ground so the earth receives their message. And this one that's a little bit self-promoting, but the elder that we work with, she wrote this story and the children at Balnarring have illustrated it for her. And it's about when there's disharmony and everybody's taking when they shouldn't be taking, and they're fighting and there's no harmony. And so the Port Phillip Bay starts to rise and cover up the land. And the only way you can stop doing that is by people coming back into harmony. So I think that's a really good example of the sea and people working together with the land. And one last thing is, last week on my team, I didn't realise it was Sea Week this week, but last week the whole team went down to Balnarring Beach and we worked with Dolphin Research Institute, and they gave us information about that environment. So all the team was skilled up to be able to then share that knowledge with the kids.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I feel awful to interrupt, but
no, don't.
Just is there one or two questions that people can't wait until the end to ask? If you'd like to raise your hand, otherwise we'll move on.
They're still processing the maggot story, right?
I think so, but it's so powerful. It's endlessly fascinating to children. Okay, so we will.
Aboriginal group. It's the Bunurong people.
Lovely. Oh, Bron has raised her hand.
Yes, Bron, you're on mute.
I am. I was being respectful. I was just going to, I raised my hand just to make sure you saw the question, but you saw it way before I did. So all good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so thank you, Karen, and please put your questions in the chat if you can't, or write them on the back of an envelope so that you can remember, because at the end it'd be lovely to have a great discussion.
Thanks,
Not sure how
Jennifer.
you move on from maggots, but we will try. Okay, so I would now like to introduce Fiona Harris as an experienced educator and advocate for nature-based learning. She's worked with a large not-for-profit organisation in New South Wales for 15 years. With a background in early childhood education, Fiona initially worked as a teacher and director at the picturesque KU Wombara preschool, nestled in the quiet beachside suburb of Wombara, New South Wales. Her enthusiasm for connecting children with nature and fostering their ecological identity flourished in this setting, while she facilitated regular nature play outings which connected children with place and encouraged sustainable action. Fiona is dedicated to inspiring educators to create enriching learning environments that nurture children's connection with the natural world and empower them to take action for a sustainable future. Fiona's presentation is entitled Sustainability, the Sea and Early Childhood Pedagogy. She will be sharing some pedagogical beliefs, values, practices and understandings of children's citizenship and rights as members of local communities. Lastly, Fiona will share some provocations to inspire your thinking. So welcome, Fiona.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Karen. I'm indebted to Karen many, many years ago. I had some time with Karen down at Balnarring, and she came and visited us at Wombara. And, you know, I've learned so much from her. So nice to be here with her tonight. I'm just going to share a screen. Is that coming up for you now?
Yes, Fiona.
Great. I'm just going to get my notes ready. I won't be able to see you, so you'll have to interrupt me if you want to talk to me. So I do work in KU's learning and development team as a professional learning facilitator, but for 11 years I was the teacher and director at KU Wombara. And it's this very, very small beachside community on the south coast of New South Wales. And from preschool, we can see the Pacific Ocean spread out before us. It's only about, 20 metres to get to the beach. And we began our commitment to nature play pedagogy in 2014 after hearing Karen Anderson speak at the ECEN conference. And then I was lucky enough to go and spend some time down visiting her in Balnarring and join their program for the day. And I said it before, I'm forever grateful for her supporting my learning. So I was more than pleased to see sustainability elevated as a principle in the early years learning framework, and I'm even more convinced that place-based pedagogy is an excellent way to support learning about connection to and interdependence with all the species and systems we share the earth with. And just having heard Karen's stories, we hear relationship, we hear connections between learnings and relationships with different species. And we hear stories of place, and this is how children learn to become committed to caring for place. And the early years are a pivotal time for establishing values, and we're really well placed as educators to support not only children's learning but also influence the broader community understandings about sustainability. So this shift in the early years learning framework to include sustainability has at its core an ethical dilemma. Parker Palmer says that teaching holds a mirror to the soul, that we teach who we are. So it stands to reason that without a firm understanding and a belief in the importance of sustainability on our own and the world's well-being, we're unlikely to commit to teaching sustainability effectively. So education for sustainability requires each of us to really deeply examine our own values and commit to ongoing learning. I just can't underestimate the importance of having this really clear idea of your values, what's important to your community as a whole, before you delve into practice. It's these guiding principles which anchor your decision-making and determine your path. So I've highlighted some key points in this extract from our philosophy to give you some visibility about how these values shape curriculum. And we can hear an echo of what the early years learning framework is asking us to take on, a shared responsibility, partnerships. And we believe all people have a part to play as citizens here, and that sustainability is woven through all facets of our work, social, environmental, economic, and often political. And that curriculum is braided in connection with this beautiful place, and it stretches alongside us. And action, that there's a commitment to care for this place as part of our connection. So knowing your values will help you make decisions about which direction you'll go in. And it makes sense that if your connection to place sits within your values, then the pedagogy which follows must include some regular visits in your community. So every week we'd walk down to the beach, we'd cross the rock pools up to the headlands, we'd walk through the bush, or we'd go over a creek to the north end of our beach. And in our walks, we'd go really slowly, and we'd stop at each and every opportunity left for us by the tide. And yes, we saw maggoty birds and things like that as well. And I so could identify with some of those stories that Karen was sharing. Anne Pello gives us this quote, which I hold as a bit of a mantra. I grew up a little bit wild beside the river in the national park, and I wanted this wild connection to land for the children I was teaching, in order that they might develop this love for place. But the work of Sue Elliott and Julie Davis, Fran Hughes and others, they ask us to deepen this commitment, to recognise that the world we're living in is troubled and requires all of us to shift in our collective seats. We've got to do more than just love it. We have to take action, and we have to show children how to take action. Our vision is to find a way to live more ethically with the earth, to work hard to combat climate change, and to teach this to the children that we work with. So to enable us to reach this vision, we developed some pedagogical practices that took us beyond our preschool fences and into the community and connecting with others. And our walk was much more than a delightful romp on the sand and a splash in the rock pools. This was intentional pedagogy designed to invite observation, discussion, and prompts for further action. One year, the children were captivated by the idea of whale migration, because we could see the whales breaching just offshore from the garden, from the playground, and many children became quite proficient at spotting them. Where are they going? Why are they going there? How big are they? I can't see one. So we followed this line of questioning over a number of months, and eventually we built a 26-metre whale with 2 calves in her belly on our lawn using milk cartons. And this learning took us on to further discussions about ocean warming and whale hunting and trawl net fishing and bycatch. And we all learned a little bit more about how selective we need to be when buying fish to eat. And can I recommend the documentary Seaspiracy as a resource for educators to learn a little bit more about the fishing industry. We leaned into the experience of our local community. Madeline Kelly and Evan Willis are artists using their work to campaign for environmental justice. They spent time with us teaching about stories behind their work. Madeline uses Tetra Paks, you know, those horrible plastic and foil things that are really hard to recycle. She makes these beautiful pelagic seabirds, and her work helped us to learn about the huge islands of rubbish floating offshore and the dire consequences for birds who swallow this rubbish. We became really proudly visible in our community, and we shared our story in the local paper. Our weekly cleanups caught both the attention and the gratitude of the local council, and we even started a short film by the EPA about keeping the beaches and ocean clean. And this visibility became a bit of a magnet to others who were keen to share their own work. And so we'd often have dropper-inners. Lynn Tuck, a local marine biologist, had found a live shark egg growing on Coaldale Beach. And as a marine biologist, she knew that it needed care before it could be released, otherwise it would just die. So she hatched that egg in a bucket where she changed the water every day, and she came in and talked to the children about this. And there's a little video called Portia the Port Jackson Shark on YouTube if you want to watch that story. So we extended our invitations to grow our learning and our thinking. The Take 3 for the Sea team joined our walk, and I recommend their website to access some really great resources. We had local bird experts help us to get to know our local bird species, and both marine scientists And oceanographers joined our walk and added to our growing knowledge of place, helping us to know about tides and rips as well as the creatures we'd meet on the rock platform. Our children became local place experts, invested in their learning and love of place. And can I just say how much it helps that all of our families shared this same hope and vision and supported our walks both financially and by participating to allow us to get out in really small groups. So democracy is the building of community that listens to each other, that respects difference and is at the core of the early years learning framework. And I am curious that the political pillar of sustainability is not as clearly articulated, but it is there. This demonstration, I was sitting in the O, demonstrates, was a huge percentage of our preschool community. Children were really full of chatter about it the following week. And I'm not saying that our children really understand the ins and outs of coal seam fracking, but they're learning all the time, watching those around them. And they came away understanding that the environment isn't a source to use and abuse, that it needs careful consideration in the decisions made about how we live in it and with it, and that these decisions impact our own health and well-being and those of the other species that we share place with. I really believe that children have this great capacity for justice and the need to be involved in local community issues if they're to take their rightful place as citizens. And if we're to uphold the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, it's important that children really know and understand the world they're living in. They can make informed decisions about matters that affect them. Citizenship is fully realised when children know and understand that they can make a difference in the world, and they do. So it came as no surprise that these children, after leaving preschool, initiated their own after-school club called Ocean Plastic Patrol, and they continue to collect rubbish from the beach as a way of caring for place. They're becoming agents of change on Facebook and Instagram, and other local schools have joined the club, collecting and caring for the beaches in their own communities. And of course, they do this with the support and encouragement of their families, but we see children's actions and voices clearly visible. Looking after place is important, and we can all make a difference. So I've just chosen 3 really short stories to highlight the importance of place-based pedagogy as a catalyst for learning about the real challenges of the world. The first image, pondering the graffiti on the wall, the questions: who did it? Why did they do it? Educators invited children to think more deeply about this issue. Well, who cleans it off and repaints it? Where does that money come from? Where does the council get its money from? What else do rates pay for? And we had families with us, of course. Could cleaning up the graffiti impact spending on other important things in our community? You don't get graffiti on the walls in the preschool environment. So in the real world, we get to ponder really complex issues. This second image shows us examining a collection of tiny periwinkles that I rescued out of Alex's bucket after he declared, "I hate them, they hurt my feet." This is an invitation to help him and his friends learn about the snails living inside these small sharp shells, that they eat the algae on the rocks and they make it less slippery to walk on, and that they are a primary source of food for the lovely oyster catcher birds that we like to watch. He really had no idea that periwinkles were alive. And then watching him connect this learning with all the millions of snail trails and the rock pools was such a joy. He took it upon himself to explain this over and over to all of his friends that day. And this important mission that he took on to keep them in the water lest they dry up and die. And this third picture has a group of boys pondering the sign on the wall which warns people to beware of falling rocks. Thomas explains about falling rocks and gives an explanation of erosion caused by the waves. The children marvel at the huge rocks on the platform, and then they try their hardest to move them, recognising the power of ocean waves to shape the foreshore. They observe the changes on the platform across the year. Sometimes it's covered in sand and other times it's exposed, and the rock pools teem with life. Educators deepen learning with further discussion about rising sea levels due to climate change, and they see this happening in front of their eyes, and they understand why the council are working hard to reinforce the foreshore walls. Back at the centre, so we look for ways to reduce consumption and waste, leaving the lights off, using air conditioning only when it's necessary, always with the doors closed, and then addressing food waste and paper waste. As nature players, play-based pedagogy brings our attention to the real world in a tangible way. We encounter all manner of things which influence our thinking. And so I'm just leaving you with these questions to think on. And I don't know whether you want to screenshot that or, take a photo. How are you supporting children to see, learn about and understand environmental concerns? What conversations are you having with children when they discuss our interdependencies with the natural world and what this means for action? And how are you building on children's curiosity to develop a sustainable worldview? And last slide, just a very quick promo. 2 books to support your thinking and planning for nature play and education for sustainability, both Australian. I'm sure you know Sue and Fran. I think Fran's here in the audience too. Also in June this year, we'll be hosting a nature play conference with a focus on sustainability. And if you're in Sydney, we'd love you to join us if you'd like to know some more. There's tickets to Humanitics. I'm going to stop sharing because I can't see you when I share. Now, there you are. I can see you all again. Any questions?
Thank you, Fiona. Very polished presentation.
That's become my job now.
Oh, okay. Yes, so now we move on to any questions for Fiona and Karen. We've had some put into the chat. So Bron or Steph, do you have any questions?
Yes, one for Karen that Andrea asked about, is it tricky to manage outdoor kindy around weather if one group is inside while the other is outside? Do you want to speak a little bit, Karen, to weather? I know you could speak for another whole day about, managing weather.
Get that light off. Yes, so look, it's about commitment and why you want to do that sort of connection with country. And if it's really strong, then you'll just make it work. Interestingly, we have had lots of discussions around rain and wind, but the last 2 weeks we've had, for the first time ever, discussions around heat. And we've only cancelled the nature program twice or 3 times in 15 years due to rain and weather, wind. But last week we cancelled it because of heat, first time ever.
Wow.
And we didn't actually know how the families would cope, but one of the families is a firefighter. He said, good call. The ranger said, good call. So we've actually, I think the heat's more problem than the cold. But if I was in the snow, I might not say that. So it's just making sure that everyone's comfortable and that you're not going out to be uncomfortable. So if you think you're going to be uncomfortable, then that's a time not to persist, because everyone will just be grumpy and you won't achieve what you're hoping to achieve. So you just work together, and you do have to have the right clothing, but there is still bad weather. And what happens at Balnarring is one group has their day at the centre, and while the other group is down in the beach space. So it's not, we're not able to just go back. We have to make a call early in the day what we're going to do. Hope that answered that, Andrew.
There's no more messages. There's no more questions in the chat. So if anyone wants to put their hand up and ask a question or add comment, you'd be very welcome to do that.
I did join Karen's group at Balnarring on a rainy day, on a day that it was raining, and I have to say that those children are super resilient. It was week 3 of term 1. These children were experiencing their 3rd visit out, and it started to rain. Phillip Island completely disappeared. According to one child, it sank. But the fog and the mist and the rain was all just part of helping to understand how country works.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Maria.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure. I have an absolutely brand new laptop and I have no idea how to put the camera on, but I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yes.
So I'm Maria. I'm a lecturer at TAFE in Adelaide in the Children's Education and Care program. And having just written, we have a new unit in our new training package, 049, which is all around environmental responsibility. And I'm really curious to ask people who are working in the sector, how are they going with including the new principle around sustainability? And given that, and this links back to what you were saying, Fiona, you know, we're educators are expected to teach children about environmental responsibility and all these really big topics, but it means that they need to educate themselves. And so I'm just really curious as to how educators and services feel that they're going with that and including this new principle.
I'll have a go answering that.
Thank
Really
you,
good-
Karen.
Really good question, Maria. And I don't actually know the answer correctly, but what I would think, because it's similar to having the First Nations principle in there as well, is teachers will do probably tokenistic, I would imagine, until they have the background and the knowledge and then the commitment and the drive to know why it's so important. And that takes a long, long time. And I think when people go, oh, yeah, we've provided a 3-hour learning session, so teachers will be right now, it doesn't happen. It happens over time with building on your knowledge and your understanding. And it'll be interesting to see what support is given, because we wouldn't have studied that, my era, at any level at university. So it's great that it's coming into those spaces. But I wonder, like the people that are teaching it in those spaces, what knowledge they've actually got as well. So I think it's going to take a while for it to all fall into place and be authentic.
And just
you, Karen.
one of the things that I talk to my students about, you might not know everything, you might not have the answers to children's big questions, but, you know, it's about, okay, saying to the child, I don't know, but where could we find that out? So I always say, see yourself as a learner alongside children.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Great advice.
Yeah, thanks, Karen.
And really, I think the early years learning framework is asking for a real shift in our values, that we're moving away from an anthroperspective. I can never say this word. Say it for me, Franny.
Anthropocene.
Thank you. Perspective into a more ecological perspective, where we see ourselves as part of a bigger thing rather than in charge of the whole shebang. And until people are ready to shift that perspective and recognise that we need to take a more humble view on this, then I don't think that they will teach it well. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Fiona. We have a Melanie who has raised her hand.
Hi. Just answering the question about how people who are working in the sector understanding sustainability. I just completed an honours thesis with that. That was my question, focusing on how do educational leaders perceive sustainability. And I purposefully chose my my subjects. I guess the people I interviewed were educational leaders who had a reputation for doing fabulous things in the sustainability space in early childhood. Just to find out, well, what do they know about sustainability, and how did they find that out, and how did they gather that knowledge? And what I found was that a lot of the knowledge that they gathered was beyond the education sector. It was looking outside, it was connecting with community, so local community, council groups, and those sorts of organisations, organisations like Take Three for the Sea, and just participating in community events where they could meet people and learn from them. And all of them, you know, and this is, you know, the sustainability principle is new, but sustainability in the environmental sense has been in the EYLF since 2009. And as we know, a lot of the research, I saw Sue Elliott's here, and Sue Elliott is peppered all throughout my paper. But you know, it found that educators didn't understand what environmental sustainability was all about. And now educators are expected to be implementing these other pillars, and it's quite a worry, you know, where is this knowledge going to come from for the sector? Is it going to be funded by someone at some point, and who's going to deliver that training?
Yep. So they're very good questions, Melanie. Is that what you wanted to address, to have Fiona and Karen address for you, or somebody else?
No, that's not. I wasn't answering a question. I was just kind of putting out that provocation for all of us. I don't think anyone has the answer to that. But I do want us to kind of be asking those questions, you know, beyond this little closed group of awesome people who are, you know, working towards, you know, sustainability being understood and being implemented successfully in early childhood programs. You know, how do we get this messaging beyond here, and how do we get our TAFEs and universities and all of this able to support new teachers coming out to successfully understand it. And I know that's happening. I know there are rewrites happening, and I'm excited for it. But what do we do with the existing population of teachers?
Okay, so sorry, I will underline that one and have people think about that. But just to let everybody know, if you weren't aware, that there is an alliance that's forming amongst all the early childhood organisations around Australia. So EAAC, our mob, LGSWA, South Australia, there's every state and territory that we can get in there. And that's the intention of that group, is to keep pushing, because we can work across all those sectors. We have Steph and Sue are having constant conversations with ASEQA. Steph, did you want to sort of address that maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I can't speak to what's happening in the higher ed sector, and maybe somebody else on the Alliance can speak to that. But yes, I'm the convener of AAAC, the Victorian sister network, and yes, we have come together, as Jennifer said, as the Alliance, and we have been working closely with ASEQA on this very topic, Melanie, about the absolute need to be resourcing the sector, and we are, you know, saying loud and clear how fabulous the sustainability principle is, and how is it going to be supported. And so there's a lot of work sort of happening behind the scenes, working with ASEQA, and also one of the things that's come out of the work together with the Alliance is a conference coming later in October. So I haven't got something to put up on the screen, but very soon we're going to be starting to sell tickets for the Australian Early Childhood Sustainability Alliance conference, which will be hosted by AAAC in Melbourne at Swinburne University, and it will be a Friday and Saturday conference, October 25th and Saturday 26th. Many of the conference working group are here in the audience tonight and are working hard behind the scenes to get a really great program together, complete with field trips. So I encourage you to mark that in your calendars, and, you know, keep your ear to the ground, or get in contact if you're wanting to find out more information, because we certainly will be taking this message as well back to ASEQA, that that resounding feedback that the sector is, you know, looking for support. We can definitely take that back to ASEQA to be, you know, trying to be pushing this along to get support as well.
Okay.
Thanks.
Steph, it might be interesting to note that one of the items that came up quite early in those discussions with ASEQA was that the people that go out and do the assessment may also not have enough professional development. And I think that's come through quite clear tonight in the conversations that have been had, is that they need to look at their values. They need to understand what sustainability is. They need to get experience at what is good practice. So there's an assumption that they know what they're assessing. and I don't think that's very clear. We just have a couple of minutes left. Is there anybody that, Lisa, would you like to be the last cab off the rank?
Oh, I don't know
Or a
about last cab. I was just going to say to that same point, yes, as part of the Alliance, we're doing all of this work, but I think I'm going to do a shout out to everyone sitting here as educators or whatever role you've got. Everyone's got a role to play in this. So ask your organisations, ask your authorising officers about, well, how are they going to support you? Because we're going to need that momentum of educators' voices saying, yes, we need support to be able to really help advocate as well. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. Bronwyn. Bronwyn has a question.
I don't know why I put Bronwyn, because really that's what I'm called when I'm in trouble. But building on from you too, Lisa, I think we need to be bold enough to say to our authorised officers, hey, have you heard of the Alliance? Have you heard of peak bodies? So we're actually sending them in the direction. So, you know, that tokenistic assessment and rating of sustainable or sustainability principles, if that's what's being assessed and that's what we're seeing, we need to kind of call it out.
Yeah.
I'm not as scared of them as I used to be, I think. So get a bit bolder, don't you?
I think that's a powerful advocacy tool, is to learn how to be assertive. And, you know, you are allowed to push back and be assertive around what the claims are on behalf of your children, which really is what we're all being asked to do. So we're allowed to get our big girl pants on, or big boy pants on.
Can I just note one other thing, Jennifer?
Yes.
We're not going to go into detail, but we did talk about also the importance of in talking about the sea and the ocean, also talking about rivers and creeks, and the importance of, I mean, where I'm on country with children, I'm on a creek, and I know Bron is as well, and the work that can be done in speaking with children about the connectedness of our waterways and our creeks and our rivers and our sea, and doing all of that work, even though we might not be at the beach, like Karen, we've still got our place and our message that can be woven through our pedagogy around the big picture connectedness between our waterways as well.
Thank you, Steph. Fran, and then I will have to close the session.
Okay. I know it's a bit late in the session, but I'm just wondering about those people who've not had a chance to say anything tonight. If anybody would like to, any of those of you who are practitioners, you might like to have a word. And I'm just talking, I'm from the New South Wales Early Years Nature Connections group, so we're part of the Alliance as well. But anyone like to say anything? I think it's really nice to hear from those who haven't had a chance to say anything yet. If not, don't worry.
Aurora.
Hi, I'd just like to thank the Alliance and the AAAC, because they provide these learning circles, and I think they're great. And I think Sue Elliott has been really good in guiding like the message about sustainability, and that's the message that I give to my staff. I always say just go into AAAC, into the Alliance, and look at the information, and we're just unpacking sustainability and what it means for us, because it might mean different thing for different communities. So thank you.
Thank you. That was a lovely thought. It's an ongoing conversation like the children have about the seal. Thank you, everybody. If there is no further input, we will draw the learning circle to a close. And can I thank everybody most sincerely? Sea Week is an important event for us. And I'd like to thank the Alliance members for coming together to provide the early years perspective. It's incredibly important. Thank you so much.